أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد. We begin by praising Allah Azza wa Jal, Lord of the Alameen, which is mankind, jinn and everything that exists. And we bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his slave and his messenger. Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who believe. And if we believe in Allah Azza wa Jal, then this is referring to us. Allah is specifically saying, you, listen. So we're supposed to say, Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Allah, we obey, we're listening. Fee Allah, the fee that He deserves, and die not except in the state of Islam. What's Islam? Submission. Submission. Allah orders this, I apply it. Allah forbids this, I stay away from it. Submission, die not except in the state of submission to Allah Azza wa Jal. Tonight's talk is about a specific topic. But before that topic, I thought I'm going to mention the story of a very special companion. She was a female. This companion was one of a kind. And no one else, out of all the companions, even the wives of the Prophet, even Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman and Ali, none of them had the honors this woman had. This woman's name was Barakah radiallahu anha. And then inshallah I'll explain why I mentioned the story after that. Barakah was a young Abyssinian girl. She was on sale in Mecca. She didn't know exactly where she was from, who she was, who her parents, who her ancestors were, her roots. She didn't know what they were. And she became the servant. She was bought by Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib. Who's Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib? The father of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the father of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam bought this slave to take care of the affairs of Amina. Who was Amina? Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's mother, right? So this girl became a servant. 2 weeks after Amina and Abdullah got married, Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of Rasulullah, sent Abdullah on a trip to Damascus. On a business trip, on a trading trip, an expedition. But it wasn't like it was here today. Like you go on a trip halfway across the world for 2 weeks and you come back. This is a trip that'll take months. This is a trip where you'd have 70, 80 people guiding the caravans that you're taking that distance. This is a trip where many people don't come back from. So Amina was very distressed. She was upset. She was crying. The henna was still on her skin. They were just newlyweds 2 weeks after their marriage. How can you send my husband on such a long expedition 2 weeks after we're married? So she was bedridden for a long time and she spoke to no one. And in a society which was extremely hospitable, a society where guests, when they came over, you would give them your best, she was so distressed and upset that she wouldn't even look at the guests when they came over. And Barakah would constantly spend her time with her and look after her. 2 months had passed since Abdullah had left, and Amina called Barakah, and she tells her, I saw lights. Tells her, I had a dream. I saw lights coming from my abdomen, lighting up the mountains, the hills and the valleys of Mecca. I saw lights coming from my abdomen, lighting up the hills, the valleys and the mountains of all of Mecca. So Barakah replied to her, do you feel pregnant? She said, yes, Barakah, but I do not feel the discomfort that other women feel. I don't feel any pain, but I feel pregnant. So Barakah, look what she said, radiallahu anha. You shall give birth to a blessed child who will bring much goodness. Subhanallah. Amina stayed sad and melancholic for a long time. Barakah was always with her, trying to comfort her, telling her stories and jokes and so on to keep her happy. Abdul Muttalib, when the time came when Abraha, who's Abraha? The king of Yemen who sent his elephants to destroy the Kaaba, right? In the Quran, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ. You know that story. It's a long story where they sent the massive army with the elephants, and as soon as they got next to the Kaaba, they'd direct the elephants towards the Kaaba, and they wouldn't move anymore. And they'd even stab him with those sticks and so on and so forth, but they wouldn't move. They'd turn him the other direction and they'd walk off. So subhanAllah, it's a long story. At this state, when Mecca was under siege and Abdul Muttalib told everyone to leave, Amina was so upset and so distressed that she stayed in the house. She refused to leave. Until the time came when Barakah would say, I used to sleep at the foot of her bed and heard her groans at night as she called for her absent husband. Her moans would awaken me at night, and I would try to comfort her and give her courage. Barakah said, Barakah one day was at Abdul Muttalib's house, and the news came that Abdullah had died. The father of Rasulullah ﷺ had died. This is what Barakah had to say. She said, I screamed when I heard the news. I don't know what I did after that, except that I ran to Amina's house and shouting, lamenting for the absent one who would never return, lamenting for the beloved one for whom we waited for so long, lamenting for the most beautiful youth of Mecca, for Abdullah, the pride of Quraysh. Abdullah, the father of Prophet ﷺ, was the pride of Quraysh, and there's many stories that shows this. When Amina heard the news, she fainted, and I stayed beside her bed while she was in a state between life and death. There was no one else but me in the house, in Amina's house. I nursed her and looked after her during the day and throughout the nights until she gave birth to her child Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on a night in which the heavens shone with the light of Allah Azza wa Jal. You're starting to get a picture of why Barakah was so special. Look where she was there from. Look when she was involved in the family of the Prophet ﷺ from, before he was even born. Barakah had one of the greatest honors any person could ever have. She was the first person to hold the Prophet ﷺ in her hands. She was the first person to hold the greatest of mankind in her hands. See, out of the billions and trillions of people, Allah chose 125,000 prophets and messengers. And out of the 125,000 prophets and messengers, He chose 5 to be ulul azmi min rusul, the top 5 prophets. And out of the top 5, the Prophet ﷺ was chosen as the best, as the greatest. His name is right beside the name of Allah. La ilaha illallah, Muhammadun Rasulullah. And Barakah was the first person to hold him in her arms. Radiallahu anha. Abdul Muttalib was so overjoyed when the Prophet ﷺ was born that he held him in his arms and he ran to Mecca, to the Kaaba, and held him up for all the people to see. Barakah stayed with Amina while the Prophet ﷺ was sent with who? Who was he sent with? Who breastfed him? Halim al-Sa'diyah, Jazakallahu khairan, but you have to raise your voice a bit, yeah? Halim al-Sa'diyah. And the story also is a long story. We're not going to get into it because the story is about Barakah. And just to cut it short, was, you know how it was, they came, she was very poor, didn't even have enough milk in her breasts to feed her son. And the mule was very slow. She arrived to Mecca in the last person. But when she took the Prophet ﷺ, her mule beat everyone back home, and she had plenty of money, and her breasts would feed both Muhammad ﷺ and her children, and so on and so forth. And you know how it was, to the extent where when she returned Rasulullah ﷺ to his mother, she asked if she could keep him again for another year. So this is a very important point here. Have you noticed the names we've mentioned so far? And these were pagans. These were people who worshipped idols, right? Al-Manat wal-Uzza and so on. Look at the names we've mentioned so far. We mentioned Abdullah, the slave of Allah, the father of the Prophet ﷺ. Amina, security, right? Barakah, the blessings of Allah. Halim al-Sa'diyah, Halima, patience, tranquility, love, thoughtfulness, and Sa'diyah, happiness. Look who the Prophet ﷺ was surrounded by. Look who Allah chose to surround the Prophet ﷺ. When the Prophet ﷺ returned, Barakah welcomed him with joy, longing and admiration. When the Prophet ﷺ turned 6 years old, Amina decided to go and visit the grave of Abdullah, her husband, the father of Rasulullah ﷺ. But they never told him what they were going to do. So every day for a few weeks, she would leave him with her brothers, his uncles, and she would go and spend the day at the grave, and then she would come back. Amina was consumed with grief. And on the way back to Mecca, from Yathrib. What's Yathrib? Medina. It was the name of Medina before it was called Madinat Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So on the way back, she was very distressed and she became sick with fever. Halfway between Yathrib and Medina, in a place called, who knows what that place was called? Halfway between Yathrib and Mecca, in a place called, anyone know? It was called Al-Abwa. In a place called Al-Abwa, Amina called out to Barakah in a choking voice. Barakah is relating this story. She said, she whispered in my ear, "O Barakah, I shall depart from this world shortly. I commend my son Muhammad to your care. He lost his father while he was in my abdomen, and here he is losing his mother right in front of his eyes. Be a mother to him, O Barakah, and never leave his side." Barakah said, my heart was shattered and I began to sob and wail. The Prophet ﷺ, who I was holding, was distressed by my wailing and began to weep. He threw himself into his mother's arms and held tightly onto her neck. She gave one last moan and then was forever silent. Barakah wept bitterly. With her own hands, she dug the grave. She dug a hole in the sand and she buried Amina. Barakah took the Prophet ﷺ to Abdul Muttalib, his grandfather, and she stayed there to look after him. 2 years later, Abdul Muttalib passes away. So she takes him to who? Abu Talib, his uncle. And she stayed there as well to look after him. Even after he turned at the age of 25 and he married Khadija, even after he was married, she went and lived with him in the house of Khadija and looked after him there. Look at the barakah of this woman, barakah. Look at the blessings and the honor Allah Azza wa Jal gave her. This is her statement. She said, I never left him and he never left me. One day the Prophet ﷺ called out to Barakah, and he used to call her what? Ya Ummah, oh my mother. The Prophet ﷺ used to call this woman, oh my mother. Can you believe that? Yani the greatest of mankind, the greatest creation. How much honor and respect and loyalty and love does a son have to the mother? So the greatest man, this woman has got all these rights on him. It's as if she's got all these rights on him, all this fadl on him, because she was as if he was the mother. Ya Ummah, he used to call her mother. The Prophet ﷺ told her, I want you to marry. So Barakah replied, I shall never leave you. Does a mother abandon her son? The Prophet ﷺ smiled and he kissed her head. And he looked at Khadija and he said, this is the Prophet ﷺ's word, look what he said. This is Barakah. This is my mother after my own mother. She is the rest of my family. Subhanallah. So the Prophet, so what's it called? So after the Prophet ﷺ left, Khadija spoke to Barakah and she told her this is what the Prophet ﷺ wants and this is what he wants you to get married and so on and so forth. So she agreed and she got married to Ubayd bin Zayd and she had a son and his name was Ayman. And at this point, this is what her laqab, her nickname or the name they used to call her by was Ayman. But the marriage didn't last long. Her husband died and she returned to live with the Prophet ﷺ again. When the Prophet ﷺ received his prophethood, at what age? 40 years old. When the Prophet ﷺ received his prophethood, Barakah was amongst the first to believe. But she wasn't given this honor. She wasn't given these ni'am from Allah Azza wa Jal, this barakah, for no reason. She actually used to strive. She used to sacrifice. She used to give. She would expose herself to punishment, persecution from the Quraysh, and risk her life to gain information on the plans and conspiracies of the mushrikeen against the Prophet ﷺ. An old woman, she used to risk her life and go through punishment and torture and persecution just so she can bring information to the Prophet ﷺ about what the kuffar were planning against him. One night, to the extent where one night when there was an urgent message from Khadija to the Prophet ﷺ, and that was the time where it was the beginning of Islam, where they used to gather at the house of Al-Arqam, right? All the Quraysh were out there looking for him. They had even blocked the roads and you couldn't get from from the house of Khadija to the house of Al-Arqam. Yet Barakah, this old frail woman, managed to find a way and risked her life to get to the Prophet ﷺ and give him this message. When she reached the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ smiled and said, look what the Prophet ﷺ told her. You are blessed, Ayman. You are blessed, Ayman. Surely you have a place in paradise. The Prophet ﷺ guaranteed her a place in paradise. As soon as Barakah left, the Prophet ﷺ looked at the companions and told them, should one of you desire to marry a woman from the people of paradise, let him marry Ayman. Now all the companions were silent. No one would get up. This woman was old. She was over 50 years old. She wasn't pretty, she wasn't, and back then it wasn't like today, you're not working, you're on Centrelink, you can still survive. Back then it was a responsibility to get married. It's tough to support your wife. But then Zayd bin Haritha, who's Zayd? The servant of the Prophet ﷺ. The person who was so beloved to the Prophet ﷺ. Very, very beloved to the Prophet ﷺ. Zayd bin Haritha was the child who, when the Prophet ﷺ took him as his slave, and it had been a mix-up. And they found out, the father was looking for him throughout this whole time. Zayd bin Haritha, his father, was looking for him. When he finally found him, he knocked on the door of the Prophet ﷺ, and he told him, I am Zayd's father, and he's a slave, he's with us, and we've got wealth, and so on and so forth. The Prophet ﷺ told him, let him choose. And Zayd bin Haritha, even though he was young, and he was a slave, he chose the Prophet ﷺ. He chose to stay with the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ loved him dearly. He was there all the time. At night, during the day, when they were on expeditions, when he was preaching, wherever he was, the Prophet Zayd bin Haritha was there. And Zayd bin Haritha was given the honor of taking the final army before the Prophet ﷺ passed away. He died as a shaheed later on. So Zayd bin Haritha, he stood up. He came forward and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I shall marry Ayman. By Allah, she is better than any woman with grace and beauty. She's guaranteed paradise. So Zayd and Ayman got married and they had a son. What was his name? You know what, mate? I can see it on your face. This son was so beloved to the Prophet ﷺ that then when he used to walk through the streets, the people used to say, this is the beloved, the son of the beloved. The son of Zayd bin Haritha. The one who was given the army of the Muslims at the age of 16 or 18, some narrations say. Where Abu Bakr, Omar, Uthman and Ali were alive and were in the army, Khalid ibn Walid in the army, Zayd was given the honor of being the general of the army. Usama bin Zayd. The beloved, the son of the beloved. The Prophet ﷺ used to love him very much. Everywhere he would go, he would have Usama with him. He would treat him as his own son. So the Prophet ﷺ, the time came where the persecution reached so harsh in Mecca, that they migrated to Medina, right? To Yathrib, which became called Medina. And he left Ayman behind. She was an old woman and no one would harm her, no one would come next to her. So they left Ayman behind. Later, this woman who was over the age of 60 now, she made the long and difficult journey through the desert and mountains on foot. The heat was killing and the sandstorms obscured the way. But she persisted, borne along by her deep love and attachment for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When she reached Medina, her feet were swollen. Her face was covered with dust, with sand and dust. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, khairu khalqillah, the greatest of mankind, he looked at Ayman and he said, Ya Ummah, indeed for you is a place in paradise. He wiped her face and her eyes with his hands and he massaged her feet and rubbed her shoulders with his kind and gentle hands. The Prophet ﷺ is massaging the feet of this woman, Barakah. Look at the honor Allah Azza wa Jal gave her. Look at the position. During the battle of Uhud, she was over the age of 60. Do you think she sat at home? During the battle of Uhud, she would go out and she would distribute water and she would tend to the wounded. She went on expeditions with the Prophet ﷺ to Khaybar and Hunayn. Khaybar, one of the toughest battles, and Hunayn, where the companions ran away. We all know the story where they thought that for the first time in Islamic history, the Muslim army was greater than the non-Muslim army. First time ever. To the extent where one man said, today we will not lose because of our numbers. There was 10,000 of them. 9,900 of them ran away. 9,900 of them ran away. And the Prophet ﷺ and 100 men stayed behind and defeated the army by themselves. Ayman was at that battle. That battle where the Prophet ﷺ had to send people back because of lack of provision, lack of food, lack of equipment, lack of horses. Ayman went with him at over the age of 60. Her son Ayman devoted himself to the Prophet ﷺ, the son from the first husband, Ayman. And in the 8th year of Hijrah, he passed away as a shaheed. Also Barakah's husband, Zayd, we said, the second husband, also died as a shaheed in the battle of Mu'tah in Syria, one of the final battles before the Prophet ﷺ passed away. The Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr, by this time she was over 70 years old and she spent most of her time at home. And the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr and Omar would constantly visit her. Look at what she used to say when they used to come over. He used to say, Ya Ummah, the Rasulullah ﷺ used to say, Ya Ummah, are you well? Are you fine? She said, I am well, O Messenger of Allah, as long as Islam is well. She's over 70 years old. She gave all her life literally to the Rasulullah ﷺ. And she's over 70, she's sitting at home, and what's she worrying about? What's her only worry? I'm fine, don't worry about me, as long as Islam is fine. After the Prophet ﷺ passed away, she was often found crying. And Abu Bakr and Umar continued to visit her. And when they would come over, they would say, Ya Barakah, why are you crying? Don't you know that the Messenger of God has returned to Allah, to something better than what he had here? She said, yes, I know that he returned to something better. Then why are you crying? She said, I am crying because the wahi has been cut off from us. We are not receiving wahi from Allah. Yani Islam right now has received all its revelation from Allah Azza wa Jal. No more revelation will come down. Barakah was unique. She was the only one close to the Prophet ﷺ from before his birth and was around after his death. She spent her whole life with her. No other companion got this honor. Her roots were unknown, but her place in paradise was assured. Doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter what color, what race, what tribe, what language, what culture. Right now in Mecca, what do they say? Over 3 million or 5 million? I can't remember. 3 million people from around the world. Every country, every state, every color, every nation, every tribe you could think of is there. All dressed in white. You can't tell the garbage cleaner from the doctor. All seeking one thing, the forgiveness of Allah Azza wa Jal. To be forgiven for their sins and start over new. Why did I mention this story? We've probably all heard it a million times. The reason I mentioned this story is because look what this lady done for Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Look what she done for Allah. Look what she done for Islam. She understood the value of Islam. She knew it was the greatest blessing. She knew she'll be questioned on the day of judgment on how she fulfilled this responsibility of Islam that Allah gave her. And she acted. She put her life at risk. And she was an old, frail woman. What excuses do we have? She lived in a time where if you wanted to have a shower, you had to go miles to find water and heat it up. And if you didn't have time to heat it up before you needed to have a shower, you could. Abu Bakr, how did he die? He had a shower in cold water on a very cold morning, and he just got sicker and sicker until he passed away. Yani they lived at a time that was very harsh, in the middle of the desert, so much so that at Dhuhr time they all used to go home and sleep because you couldn't leave the house, it was that hot. There was no electricity. Yet she strove and she sacrificed everything she had and every opportunity to stay by the side of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Isn't it a shame that we give so little? Forget about the blood that they gave for Rasulullah and his Prophet and Islam. Forget about the sweat. Forget about the money they gave. Just time. The simplest thing, time, we can't even give it to Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah Azza wa Jal is going to question us on the day of judgment. Wallahi, a lady was found one day, she was crying. So a prophet, I don't know which prophet this was, approached her and he said, why are you crying? She said, I'm crying because my son passed away. He goes, how old is he? She said, 300. He was only young. They used to live back then thousands of years. Prophet Nuh done da'wah for 950 years. He lived more than that. His da'wah alone was 950 years. So they used to live long. So she said, my son died at a young age. He was only 300. So this prophet replied to her, he goes, how about if I told you of a time that will come that the average lifespan is 60 to 70 years? She said, is that so? He said, yes. He said, by Allah, if I lived at that time, I would put my head in sujood and I wouldn't take it out of sujood until I meet Allah. What are we giving back to Allah Azza wa Jal? Look, this lady understood the value of Islam and she gave everything to Allah Azza wa Jal, to His Prophet, to His religion. You know, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz is one of the greatest men history has ever seen. He came years after the Khulafa al-Rashidin, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman and Ali. Yet he was such a great man. In 2.5 years, he made an Islamic revolution. He reminded all the people about the time of the Prophet and his companions. Omar ibn Abdul Aziz radiallahu anhu was a man who the Prophet ﷺ said every 100 years Allah sends a mujaddid, a reviver of Islam. Every 100 years Allah chooses one person out of the millions and billions around to revive Islam. Throughout history, never have the scholars agreed on a mujaddid. There were so many people who had done so many great things that a group would think it's him and a group would think it's another person. Yeah, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz is the only man who the scholars unanimously agreed that he was the mujaddid of that time. In 2.5 years, in 2.5 years he managed to get all the scholars to agree he was the mujaddid of that time. And even though he came after those four Khulafa al-Rashidin by many years, he was named to be the fifth of the Khulafa al-Rashidin. He was a man who when he got the Khilafah, his wife Fatima was very rich. Her father was a Khalifa, her uncle was a Khalifa, her brother was a Khalifa. So when he married her and he realized the responsibility that is upon him and how he will face Allah and be questioned about this responsibility, he told her either me or the money. She gave away everything and she stayed with him. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, even though he was from Bani Umayyah, he started taking away the fat salaries from the royal family. He started taking away all these privileges and all these extra things that they took from the Muslims. He started tightening the screws on them and they started getting angry. To the extent where one day he invites the royal family over for lunch. And when they attend, he locks the door behind them and he makes them sit. And they sit for half an hour. Ya Umar, where's the food? We're hungry. Don't worry, it's coming. Another half an hour. Ya Umar, we're starving. Bring us the food. I'm making for you such an exquisite meal. Just be patient. Another little while later. Ya Umar, just bring us anything. We're starving. So Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he brings them suwaik. You got the high class people, the middle class and the low class. You know the low class, they'd argue if you brought them suwaik. They'd argue to eat it. They wouldn't want to eat it. It was very low standard food. When he put this food on the table, they all dove in. And they finished it all. So Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he looked at him. He said, it looks like you enjoyed your meal. You ate it all. They said, Ya Umar, that's all you put on the table. He said, are you full? Are you satisfied? They said, yes. He said, so why do you spend the money of the Muslims on such exquisite meals when this simple food, suwaik, filled your stomachs the exact same way? So Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he done many great things. Yet one day, he was asleep and he began to cry. And his wife put the blanket over him and she was soothing him until he fell asleep again. Then he woke up in the middle of the night again and he began to cry and shiver so much like a bird would shake to remove the water off its body. To the extent where his wife thought, I believed that the ummah would wake up in the morning without a khalifa. So Umar ibn Aziz, the next morning she asked him, oh my husband, why did you cry so much? I thought you would pass away this night. He said, I remember the day when a caller will call out, oh Umar, enter paradise, or oh Umar, enter hellfire, and I didn't know which I was from. Look what he was worried about. Look how much he gave to Allah. Look at his status. Look at how he revived the entire Islam. Yet look what he was scared of. What are we giving? How can we be so comfortable and secure? The Prophet ﷺ said Allah Azza wa Jalla has never overburdened us with two things, fear and security. He'll never give you two fears and two securities. If you live your life in fear, that means you perform the actions Allah orders you to do and you stay away from the evil actions. If you live your life in fear of Allah Azza wa Jalla, Allah on the Day of Judgment will give you security. But if you live your life in security, doing whatever you please, thinking nothing's going to happen, rape, steal, murder, nothing's going to happen, no one's going to question me, then Allah on the Day of Judgment, on top of all the horror and the fear, He'll make you fear Him. And they understood this. Look at Umar. After everything he had done, he was crying all night and shaking, scared that on that day he might be called out that, oh Umar, enter hellfire. We have to understand this. Where are our a'mal? Where are our righteous actions? You think it's enough to just go put $50 in a charity box? Allah Azza wa Jalla gave you that $50 and gave you the other $1,000 you got in your pocket. You're not giving anything. You're not giving anything from you. It's something Allah gave you in the first place and you're just returning it. You think coming for a half an hour lesson once a week is enough? The companions used to spend half the night in prayer. A man of the past, he was in the mosque, and as the imam finished his prayer, it was a great scholar, the imam was a great scholar. As soon as he finished his prayer, the Salat al-Dhuhr, everyone, he got up to pray the sunnah and everyone left. So he thought to himself, no, hectic, that's it, this guy, everyone's left. I'll wait for him to finish his sunnah and I'll get up and ask him some questions. I'll have him to myself. He was a great scholar. So everyone had left and he sat there waiting. He narrated this scholar prayed from Dhuhr all the way to Asr. He prayed all the way to Asr. And then at Asr he stopped. They got up, they prayed the Asr. And then he goes, after the Asr, inshallah, I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to ask him my questions. After Asr, he opened the Quran and he read Quran till Maghrib. So this man, he's standing there watching. He goes, inshallah, after Maghrib, who prayed the Maghrib and I'll ask him. He prayed the Maghrib, he got up, he prayed the Sunnah and he prayed till Isha. After Isha, he goes, you know what, after Isha I'll ask him. He has to get tired sometime. So after Isha, inshallah, before he goes home, I'll catch him. So this man gets up after Isha and he prays till Fajr. He prays till Fajr, 12, 13, 14 hours, depending on the time. So he got up after Fajr and he goes, inshallah, after Fajr, I'll ask him. He got up after Fajr, he made his tasbih and he got up to pray after the shuruq. And this man was standing there. He goes, I saw him get tired. And I heard him make a dua. Do you know what dua he made? He goes, oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from feeling tired and not being able to worship you properly. They understood our purpose of life. They understood that on the day of judgment, the only currency is your good deeds. The only thing that you can buy with is your good deeds. They understood that if you don't have enough good deeds on that day, you're not going to buy anything. They understood that if you were to harm anyone, no matter how many good deeds you do, on that day that person will come back and take his rights. To the extent where Abu Darda, or was it Abu Dhar? It was Abu Dhar. When he was arguing with Bilal, and he slipped out, he said, you're son of an Abyssinian woman. This Bilal was black. And he said this word and didn't realize what he said and he left. And Bilal got upset. So he went to the Prophet ﷺ, he told him, Ya Rasulullah, Abu Dhar said this. So the Prophet ﷺ came to Abu Dhar. He said, did you say this? When Abu Dhar realized what he had done, he put his head on the floor and he said, by Allah, I will not raise my head off this floor until you put your foot on my head. They realized that on the day of judgment we're going to be judged. And he wronged this person. So he wanted him to take his rights back. Abu Bakr, when he was arguing with a man one day, and he said something bad to him. So when he realized what he said, he told the man, say it back to me. He goes, no, I won't. He goes, say it back to me, take your rights back. He goes, no, I won't. He said, say it back to me or forgive me. He goes, no, I won't forgive you either. Now it was to Omar. Abu Bakr and Omar. And then when Omar said, no, I won't forgive you, and he went home. And Omar, when he went home, he felt bad that he didn't forgive his brother, so he was returning to speak to Abu Bakr and tell him, I forgave you. He returned to the spot, he didn't find Abu Bakr. He asked, where is he? They go, we saw him going to Rasulullah. Omar goes, Abu Bakr is going to Rasulullah to complain, so he picked up his abay and he ran after him. As Abu Bakr reached Rasulullah ﷺ, he sat there and he told him what happened and how Abu Bakr didn't forgive him. And Omar came, and you know the story, it's a long story. At the end, Rasulullah ﷺ ended up telling off Omar, wouldn't you leave my friend who stayed with me from the beginning and who belied my people? But look how much they understood our reality. How they would do everything in their power to do good and everything in their power to stay away from bad. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was the man who never could you find a good deed except he's perfected it. Except he's the first one there. No matter what companions would do. Umar radiallahu anhu, when Abu Bakr was Khalifa, when he saw Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu leave after Fajr every day and go somewhere. One day he followed him. This was the Khalifa. This man ran he ran the affairs of over a third of the planet. At that time, Islam had reached over a third of the world, and in Umar's time, it reached over two-thirds. So this man ran the entire affairs of the Muslim Ummah. Where is he going after Fajr? So he followed him. Where did he find him going? He found him enter a certain house. And in a little while he left. So after he left, Umar radiallahu anhu entered. And he saw an old lady that was blind. She said, who just came in? She said, I don't know. And this man comes in every day after Fajr. He cleans the house. He cooks us food. He milks the sheep and he leaves. He said, you don't even know who he is? She said, no. He began to cry and he said, yeah, Abu Bakr, you beat us in every field. So the next day he said, I'm going to beat Abu Bakr to do that action. So before Fajr, he went to this lady's house to do the action and he found Abu Bakr leaving already. And he said, subhanAllah, look how much. They understood that on the day of judgment, your good deeds and your bad deeds will be weighed. فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى. He who does one single atom's weight of good, that day he will see it. وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى. And he who does one single atom's weight of evil, on that day he will see it. They understood that. Isn't it a shame at how much we lack? This is only one companion. There's companions who the things that they done, bring me any man today and they couldn't do it. The striving and the sacrificing and the pain and the torture and the things they went through, and they would never back down off Islam. Today we have a job and we'll leave everything to go to that job. We'd have talks planned and a whole event for the whole day. We'll get a job and we'll leave it and go to it. Allah Azza wa Jal is going to question us. So make sure you're ready. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, we know who Abu Hurairah was. Can you ever give a hadith or a lesson without mentioning Abu Hurairah? You can't. The greatest narrator of a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He only lived 2.5 years. He only lived in the last 2.5 years the Prophet was alive. After that, the Prophet ﷺ died and Abu Hurairah lived the rest of his life without the Prophet ﷺ. But in 2.5 years, he managed to narrate over 5,000 ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. To the extent where the companions themselves, they used to say, Ya Abu Hurairah, how can you know so much about Rasulullah? Do you know how he knew so much? From the second he became Muslim, to the second the Prophet ﷺ died, he was with him. He was running after him. Wherever the Prophet was, Abu Hurairah was. He would run after him with ragged clothes, barefoot, with ragged clothes and on an empty stomach, just to gain the knowledge of Allah Azza wa Jal. To the extent where he would live with Ahl al-Suffah in the mosque, where the poor people would stay on the elevated part of the mosque. The Prophet ﷺ one day, he received donations, sadaqah, and he gathered it, and he gathered Ahl al-Suffah, and he was giving out to Ahl al-Suffah. And Abu Hurairah was amongst them. He was standing there watching. And he gave, and he gave, and he gave everyone to their heart's content. And Abu Hurairah was just standing there watching. So the Prophet ﷺ, after had given everyone, he goes, Ya Abu Hurairah, aren't you in need of some of this stuff? Some of this food and this water and so on? He goes, Ya Rasulullah, I only want one thing. He goes, and what's that? He goes, I want you to teach me what Allah has taught you. That's all he wanted. Abu Hurairah was a man who even after the Prophet ﷺ died, he would run around spreading the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, like I said, to the extent where the companions used to ask him, how can you know so much? The companions who were with him from day one. Companions who spent the entire 23 years, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, would ask him, how can you know so much about Rasulullah? And he used to say, I used to run after him day and night on an empty stomach, ragged clothes, barefoot, until I gathered what I gathered. And if it wasn't for that verse in the Quran about those who conceal the revelation of Allah, I wouldn't have said one thing. But Allah Azza wa Jal said that he who conceals the revelation of Allah, his place is destined in hellfire. So I am revealing all these ahadith. This was a man who struggled so much in his life that he made a statement, if anyone found out that death was on sale, please let me know so I can buy it. That's how much hardship he went through his life to spread this deen. You know Abu Hurairah, when he died, what he said? Do you know what one of his final statements were? Ahin min qillati zad wa tul as-safar. Ya Allah, how little I have prepared for such a long trip. Oh Allah, how little I have prepared for such a long trip. We're going to stand in front of Allah Azza wa Jal. That's the ultimatum. We're going to be judged. Are we doing enough? We can never do enough. But are we doing to the best of our potential? To the best of our ability? Because Allah Azza wa Jal isn't going to judge us on our actions only. He's going to judge us on our effort. Isn't that right? I could donate $100 and get more reward than a person who donated $1 million. Because that black could have 100 mil, but I could only have that $100. So I gave everything I had. It's on the effort, it's on the intention. I could have given $1 million and got nothing but sin, because I gave it away to show off to the people that I gave it, I'm rich or I'm generous or whatever. So shabab, we have to put some effort. Give some time. Give some effort. Have you ever thought to yourself, you know what? Today I'm going to leave my house and I'm going to do something for the sake of Allah, and I'm going to get tired, so on the day of judgment I can say I got tired for your sake. Today I'm going to go and I'm going to put some effort in a certain organization or a certain group for Allah Azza wa Jal, so that I can sweat, and so this sweat can be a witness for me on the day of judgment that I dropped this sweat in the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Have I ever thought I'm going to go and work today, and every dollar I don't need to work. I've worked my 5 days today, I'm going to get an extra shift, and this extra shift, every dollar I make, I'm sending it to the poor people. Have you ever thought today I'm going to go do some physical labor, some hard labor, and probably get some cuts and bruises, so on the day of judgment these cuts and bruises can say, Ya Rabb, these were received in your path. Give to Allah Azza wa Jal. If the Prophet ﷺ said a man on the day of judgment, he'll be dragged on his face. The Prophet ﷺ said a man will be dragged on his face his entire life in the sake of Allah. So this man, Allah alam what exactly happened to him, but the point is, he went through, to show the hardship he went through. His whole life, this man was dragged on his face in the path of Allah. And we know how much it hurts when you do a bit of wrestling or something, you get a carpet burn, everyone starts screaming. And it's very painful. So this man is dragged on his face from the second he's born to the second he dies. His entire life, he's striving, he's going through pain for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. On the day of judgment, when this man stands in front of Allah and he sees the day of judgment, he says, Ya Allah, I didn't worship you enough. What am I going to face Allah with? What am I going to show him that I've done for him? Let's put some effort for Allah Azza wa Jal. When you put effort for Allah Azza wa Jal, He fills your life with barakah. He literally fills your life with barakah. Do you understand the difference between having a life filled with barakah and not? You know those days when you have and everything goes wrong? Everything goes wrong. You wake up, you've woke up late, you're on the way to work, you have an accident, you finish from there, you're towing your car, the tow truck has an accident. Everything goes wrong. Everything goes wrong. You come home, your wife's angry, you have an argument, your kids are making trouble. Everything goes wrong. This is a life without barakah. You know a life of barakah, where Allah Azza wa Jal puts His blessings in your life? It's totally different. Everything goes right. Everything goes right. Even your physical self, your body. There was a group of people who were traveling to Hajj, and back in the days, we know how Hajj was. It wasn't a 2-week, 3-week, 4-week trip and you come back. A person wants to go to Hajj now. Aren't people at Hajj now? He'll decide, I want to go Hajj. He'll leave now and reach there next Hajj. It'll take him a year to get there. 6 months to get there. He'll go through literally hell to get there. He has to worry about food and water and what's it called, and provisions on the way there. This is a trip where many people don't come back from. So this group of people, amongst them, most of them were young men, were traveling to Hajj. And on the way to Hajj, they went through so much hardship, they were so tired, so exhausted, that the only wish of every single person in that group was for night to fall so they can sleep. That's the only desire. Every day the same thing. They go through so much hardship that the only thing they're thinking about the whole day is, I can't wait till it's nightfall so I can sleep. So nightfall came, and every single bloke dropped to the floor and slept. So one of these young blokes, he was restless during the night, and he looks up and he sees a man standing up and praying. So he was so tired he went back to sleep. Then he woke up again just before Fajr, and he saw that man standing still in prayer. Then he went back to sleep and he woke up at Fajr time. And he asked this man, he goes, oh so and so, how can you have done what you've done when you're a man at the age of 83 years old? We're young and fit and strong and so on, and our only desire was to sleep, and we slept through the whole night. How could you have done what you had done and you're at the age of 83 years old? So this man said, oh, it's just blessings, it's barakah from Allah and so on and so forth. And this man, he knew that wasn't the case. So he kept asking him and asking him until he'd made a statement. He said, oh so and so, when the soul works for Allah, the body doesn't get tired. When the soul works for Allah, the body doesn't get tired. And that's the case. If you were really connected with Allah Azza wa Jal, you wouldn't get tired. You wouldn't have enough. You'd constantly want to strive and sacrifice more and give more. You think those people who help the poor people overseas, they do it, they do it and they don't get nothing out of it. You know that satisfaction of helping someone? The barakah and the blessings and the rewards Allah gives a person. These are the people that are happy. That's why the rich and the famous, the ones who have hundreds of millions of dollars, 6, 7 houses and cars and so on, are finding no reason to live and they're killing themselves. You know, if one of them were to give a meal and save half a country, he'll sleep at night with an easy conscience. He'll sleep happily. But they're not doing that. They've tried everything else, but they haven't tried that. And therefore they're killing themselves. Suicide. Where is it ripe amongst? Who is it ripe amongst? The most rich and famous people, the most powerful people, they're the ones who have the highest suicide rates, the highest drug and alcohol problems, the highest rehabilitation problems, divorce problems, marriage problems, amongst the rich and the famous. So Allah Azza wa Jalla is going to judge us, shabab. Start striving, start sacrificing, start giving more than what you just want to give. لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will not attain true happiness and success until you give of that which you love. Not just give what you want to give. Not the things you don't want to give, the things that you love, that's what you should give. And be ready. Be ready to be questioned by Allah Azza wa Jal. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.
To listen to or download more Islamic lectures, please visit www.islamicmedia.com.au.